A pleasant afternoon to each and everyone. I am Lynan Kim A. Lluvido, and today I will talk to you about Chapter 2, which is the childhood years in Calamba. In this chapter, we will talk about Jose Rizal's beautiful memories of childhood in his native town. He grew up in a happy home, ruled by good parents, bubbling with joy, and sanctified by God's blessings. His natal town of Calamba, so named after a big native jar, was a fitting cradle for a hero. Its scenic beauties and industrious, hospitable, and friendly folks impressed him during his childhood years and profoundly affected his mind and character. The happiest period of Rizal's life was spent in this lakeshore town, a worthy prelude to his Hamlet-like tragic manhood. So now, let's first talk about the Calamba, the hero's town. So Calamba was an hacienda town which belonged to the Dominican order, which is also owned all the lands around it. It is a picturesque town nestling on a verdant plain covered with irrigated rice fields and sugar lands. A few kilometers to the south looms the legendary Mount Makiling in somnolent grandeur, and beyond this mountain is the province of Batangas. East of the town is the Laguna de Bay, an inland lake of songs and emerald waters beneath the canopy of azure skies. In the middle of the lake towers the storied island of Talim, and beyond it, towards the north, is the distant Antipolo, famous mountain shrine of the miraculous Lady of Peace and Good Voyage. Rizal loved Calamba with all his heart and soul. In fact, in 1876, when he was 15 years old and was a student in the Ateneo de Manila, he remembered his beloved town. Accordingly, he wrote a poem titled Un recuerdo a mi pueblo, which means in memory of my town. So as you can see at the bottom part of the slide, it is the picture of the house at Calamba in which Rizal was born. So in this part it was stated where the Calamba is actually located, no, kung asa lang mga neighboring cities, mga neighboring towns, dayon. Ani nga part kay dito po tong nag-make si Rizal og poem about some memories sa iyang town. So next, let's talk about the earliest childhood memories. So the first memory of Rizal in his infancy was his happy days in the family garden when he was 3 years old. Because he was a frail, sickly, and undersized child, he was given the tenderest care by his parents. His father built a little nipa cottage in the garden for him to play in the daytime. A kind old woman was employed as an aya, or so-called nursemaid, to look after his comfort. At times, he was left alone to muse on the beauties of nature or to play by himself. In his boyhood memories, he narrated how he, at the age of 3, watched from his garden cottage the Kulyawan, the Maya, the Maria Capra, and the Martin, the pipit, and other birds, and listened with wonder and joy to their twilight songs. Another childhood memory was the daily Angelus prayer. So by nightfall, Rizal related that his mother gathered all the children at the house to pray the Angelus. With nostalgic feeling, he also remembered the happy moonlit nights at the azotea after the nightly rosary. The Aya related to the Rizal children, which includes Jose, many stories about the fairies, tales of buried treasures, and trees blooming with diamonds, and other fabulous stories. The imaginary tales told by the Aya aroused in Rizal an enduring interest in legends and folklore. Sometimes, when he did not like to take his supper, the Aya would threaten him that the aswang, the nuno, the tigbalang, a terrible bearded and turbaned Bombay would come to take him away if he would not eat his supper. Another memory of his infancy was the nocturnal walk in the town, especially when there was a moon. The Aya took him for a walk in the moonlight by the river, where the trees cast grotesque shadows on the bank. Recounting this childhood experience in a student memoir, Rizal wrote, "Thus, my heart fed on somber and melancholic thoughts so that even while still a child, I already wandered on wings of fantasy in the high regions of the unknown." So yes, no, it was mentioned that Rizal enjoyed his childhood and then he would always magtambay sa ilang garden, watching the birds, mga inana, and then napod siya aya. Sa ato ang panahon ron, gitawag mo na siya yaya, no, mga tigbantay dyan nato. And kana yung yaya daw kay dukan yung mga stories. Marag kita pod ba nga, adlok-adlok kung lakuan kag wakwak na, di ba, marag kasaya kay mo to sa ta, mo sunod salamat ta sa ilang ipangingon. And also katong si Rizal daw kay ni lakaw-lakaw sa river. Another one po dahil no, katong bata pa si Rizal is katong mag-recite sa like Angelus Prayer and then appeal tong mga bata sa sulod sa ilang balay. Like that, yeah. The hero's first sorrow. The Rizal children were bound together by ties of love and companionship. They were well bred, for their parents taught them to love and help one another. Of his sister, Jose loved most the little Concha, which is Concepcion. He was a year older than Concha. He played with her, and from her, he learned the sweetness of sisterly love. Unfortunately, Concha died of sickness in 1865, when she was only 3 years old. Jose, who was very fond of her, cried bitterly at losing her. "When I was 4 years old," he said, "I lost my little sister Concha, and then for the first time, I shed tears caused by love and grief." The death of little Concha brought him his first sorrow. So ani nga part kay si Rizal kay moto yung first nga goal jud niya kay ang iyang favorite one of his favorite nga sister kay namatay because of sickness and moto dito niya na feel jud ang iyang sadness nga ni agis yang kinabuhi. So now let's move on to the devoted son of the church. A scion of Catholic clan, born and bred in a wholesome atmosphere of Catholicism and possessed of an inborn pious spirit, Rizal grew up as a good Catholic. At the age of 3, he began to take part in the family prayers. His mother, who was a devout Catholic, taught him the Catholic prayers. When he was 5 years old, he was able to read haltingly the Spanish family Bible. He loved to go to the church, to pray, and to take part in the novenas, and to join the religious processions. It is said that he was so seriously devout that he was laughingly called Manong Jose by the hermanos and hermanas terceras. One of the men he esteemed and respected in Calamba during his boyhood was the scholarly father Leoncio Lopez, the town priest. He used to visit this learned Filipino priest and listen to his stimulating opinions on current events and sound philosophy of life. So in this part kay makaingon ta nga si Jose is more on the religious part siya kay sige siya gato sa simbahan, mapil sa mga misa like that, processions, and then mutog gibinangan gyud siya ng ama ng Jose kay di ba usually if mga relihiyoso kay mga tigulang gunamrag mo lang kuan nila ba stereotype ish thing nga kanang uncle, lola, lolo, like that. Mas moto ka-idolize po siya sa usa ka pare si Father Leoncio Lopez. Man siya yung respected nga priest sa ilang lugar. Pilgrimage to Antipolo. On June 6, 1868, Jose and his father left Calamba to go on a pilgrimage to Antipolo in order to fulfill his mother's vow which was made when Jose was born. Doña Teodora could not accompany them because she had given birth to Trinidad. It was the first trip of Jose across Laguna de Bay and his first pilgrimage to Antipolo. He and his father rode in a casco or a barge. He was thrilled as a typical boy should by his first lake voyage. He did not sleep the whole night as the casco sailed towards the Pasig River because he was awed by the magnificence of the watery expanse and the silence of the night. Writing many years later of this experience, he said, "With what pleasure I saw the sunrise. For the first time I saw how the luminous rays shone, producing a brilliant effect on the rough surface of the wide lake." Ruffled surface on the wide lake. After praying at the shrine of the Virgin of Antipolo, Jose and his father went to Manila. It was the first time Jose saw Manila. They visited Saturnina, who was then a boarding student at La Concordia College in Santa Ana. So in this part no kay mo to ang first nga ni travel si Rizal kuyog iyang father sakay sila og barge, which we all know today nga katong na mo pwede masudlan og mga sakyanan, and then after that they traveled to Manila unto and met with a student. So the next one is the story of the moth. Of the stories told by Doña Teodora to her favorite son Jose, that of the young moth made the profoundest impression on him. The tragic fate of the young moth, which died a martyr to its illusions, left a deep impress on Rizal's mind. He justified such a noble death, asserting that to sacrifice one's life for it, meaning for an ideal, is worthwhile. And like that young moth, he was fated to die as a martyr for a noble ideal. So now let's move on to artistic talents. Since early childhood, Rizal revealed his God-given talent for art. At the age of 5, he began to make sketches with his pencil and to mold in clay and wax objects, which attracted his fancy. It is said that one day, when Jose was a mere boy in Calamba, a religious banner which was always used during the fiesta was spoiled. Upon the request of the town mayor, he painted in oil colors a new banner that delighted the town folks because it was better than the original one. Jose had the soul of a genuine artist. Rather an introvert child with a skinny physique and sad dark eyes, he found great joy looking at the blooming flowers, the ripening fruits, the dancing waves of the lake, and the milky clouds in the sky, and listening to the songs of the birds, the chirpings of the cicadas, the murmurings of the breezes. He loved to ride in a spirited pony, which his father brought him, and take long walks in the meadows and lakeshore with his black dog named Usman. One interesting anecdote about Rizal was the incident about his clay and wax images. One day, when he was about 6 years old, his sisters laughed at him for spending so much time making those images rather than participating in their games. He kept silent as they laughed with childish glee. But as they were departing, he told them, "Alright, laugh at me now. Someday, when I die, people will make monuments and images of me." So yes no, some of the artistic talents ni Rizal kay katong mag-mold og mga clay, mag-form sila something mga images, and then another one is katong yang banner nga gi-make for their fiesta in their town. Yes, and everyone was so amazed na ganahan ko sila ato, and that is the start of his artist journey. So the next one is First Poem by Rizal. First Poem by Rizal. Aside from his sketching and sculpturing talent, Rizal possessed a God-given gift for literature. Since early boyhood, he had scribbled verses on loose sheets of paper and on the textbooks of his sisters. His mother, who was a lover of literature, noticed his poetic inclination and encouraged him to write poetry. At the age of 8, Rizal wrote his first poem in the native language entitled Sa Aking Mga Kababata or To My Fellow Children. So here is the poem. So this poem reveals Rizal's earliest nationalist sentiment. In poetic verses, he proudly proclaimed that the people who truly love their native language will surely strive for liberty, like the bird which soars to freer space above, and that Tagalog is the equal of Latin, English, Spanish, and any other language. So let's move on to the first drama by Rizal. After writing the poem, To My Fellow Children, Rizal, who was then 8 years old, wrote his first dramatic work, which was a Tagalog comedy. It is said that it was staged in a Calamba festival and was delightfully applauded by the audience. A gobernadorcillo from Paite, a town in Laguna famous for lanzones and wood carvings, happened to witness the comedy and liked it so much that he purchased the manuscript for 2 pesos and brought it to his hometown. It was staged in Paite during its town's fiesta. So yes, no, first drama by Rizal kay katuyang gi-write kay moto gi-purchase or gi-kuha sa other officials de moto naganansad sila and gi-perform po sa ilang hometown. Since early manhood, Rizal had been interested in magic. With his dexterous hands, he learned various tricks such as making a coin appear or disappear in his fingers and making a handkerchief vanish in thin air. He entertained his townfolks with magic lantern exhibitions. This consisted of an ordinary lamp casting its shadow on a white script. He twisted his supple fingers into fantastic shapes, making their enlarged shadows on the screen resemble certain animals and persons. He also gained skills in manipulating marionettes or the puppet shows. In later years, when he attained manhood, he continued his keen predilection for magic. He read many books on magic and attended the performances of the famous magicians of the world. In chapter 17 and chapter 18 of his second novel, El Filibusterismo or The Treason, he revealed his wide knowledge of magic. So now let's move on to the Lakeshore Reveries. Lakeshore Reveries. During the twilight hours of summertime, Rizal, accompanied by his pet dog, used to meditate at the shore of Laguna de Bay on the sad conditions of his oppressed people. Years later, he related, young though he was, he grieved deeply over the unhappy situation of his beloved fatherland. The Spanish misdeeds awakened his boyish heart, a great determination to fight tyranny. When he became a man, many years later, he wrote to his friend Mariano Ponce, in view of these injustices and cruelties, although yet a child, my imagination was awakened, and I made a vow dedicating myself someday to avenge the many victims. With this idea in my mind, I studied, and this is seen in all my writings. Someday, God will give me the opportunity to fulfill my promise. So diri nga part no kay dito na to nagsugod ang iyang hatred towards the mga Spaniards cause the bad deeds that they're doing naka-affect sa ilang town and moto murag lahi na kayo ang iyang na-feel. The next one is influences on the hero's boyhood. On the night Jose Rizal was born, other children were born in Calamba and hundreds of other children were also born all over the Philippines. But why is it that out of all these children, only one boy, Jose Rizal, rose to fame and greatness? In the lives of all men, there are influences which cause some to be great and others not. In the case of Rizal, he had all the favorable influences few other children in this time enjoyed. These influences were the following. The first one is the hereditary influence. The second one is the environmental influence. And the third one is the aid of divine providence. The first one is the hereditary influence. According to biological science, there are inherent qualities which a person inherits from his ancestors and parents. From his Malayan ancestors, Rizal evidently inherited his love for freedom, his innate desire to travel, and his indomitable courage. From his Chinese ancestors, he derived his serious nature, frugality, patience, and love for children. From his Spanish ancestors, he got his elegance of bearing, sensitivity to insult, and gallantry to ladies. From his father, he inherited a profound sense of self-respect, the love for work, and the habit of independent thinking. And from his mother, he inherited his religious nature, the spirit of self-sacrifice, and the passion for arts and literature. The second one is the environmental influence. According to psychologists, environment as well as heredity affects the nature of a person. Environmental influence includes places, associates, and events. The scenic beauties of Calamba and the beautiful garden of the Rizal family stimulated the inborn artistic and literary talents of Jose Rizal. The religious atmosphere at his home fortified his religious nature. His brother Pasiano instilled in his mind the love for freedom and justice. From his sisters, he learned to be courteous and kind to women. The fairy tales told by his ayah during his early childhood awakened his interest in folklore and legends. His three uncles, brothers of his mother, exerted a good influence on him. Tio Jose Alberto, who had studied for 11 years in a British school in Calcutta, India, and had traveled in Europe, inspired him to develop his artistic ability. Tio Manuel, a hunky and athletic man, encouraged him to develop his frail body by means of physical exercises, including horse riding, walking, and wrestling. And Tio Gregorio, a book lover, intensified his voracious reading of good books. Father Leoncio Lopez, the old and learned parish priest of Calamba, fostered Rizal's love for scholarship and intellectual honesty. The sorrows in his family, such as the death of Concha in 1865 and the imprisonment of his mother in 1871 to 74, contributed to strengthen his character, enabling him to resist blows of adversity in later years. The Spanish abuses and cruelties which he witnessed in his boyhood, such as the brutal acts of the lieutenant of the Guardia Civil and the alcalde, the unjust tortures inflicted on innocent Filipinos, and the execution of Fathers Gomez, Burgos, and Zamora in 1872, awakened his spirit of patriotism and inspired him to consecrate his life and talents to redeem his oppressed people. The third and the last one is the aid of divine providence. Greater than heredity and environment in their fate of man is the aid of divine providence. A person may have everything in life, brains, wealth, and power, but without the aid of divine providence, he cannot attain greatness to the annals of the nation. Rizal was providentially destined to be the pride and glory of his nation, of our nation. God had endowed him with the versatile gifts of a genius, the vibrant spirit of a nationalist, and the valiant heart to sacrifice for a noble cause. And that would be all for the chapter 2. Thank you for listening and have a great day. Peace out.